You know, index funds feel like the simplest thing in the world, right? You just buy one and it tracks the market. Easy. But what if I told you there's something going on behind the scenes, that the very way these funds are built creates these little hidden costs that are constantly nibbling away at your returns? So let's pull back the curtain and see how this whole thing really works.
Okay, to really get this, we have to travel back to a very specific day. September 16th, 2022. It was a Friday, seemed totally normal. The market was just doing its thing. But then, right in the last few seconds of trading, something wild happened to one of the biggest stocks on the planet, Tesla.
And I mean, it was like a lightning strike. Bam! Right at the closing bell, the trading volume for Tesla just exploded. We're talking 17 times its normal average for that time of day. A crazy flood of buy orders just slammed the market, all at the exact same instant. And the weirdest part, there was no news, no big announcement, no product launch, nothing. This was caused by something else, something hidden.
So what on earth could trigger a trading frenzy that massive, that coordinated, down to the very second? Well, the answer pulls back the curtain on a hidden layer of the market. And it all starts with trying to get into one of the most exclusive clubs on Wall Street.
And that club? It's the S&P 500. Now, don't just think of it as some boring list of stocks. Oh no, this is the ultimate VIP list for corporate America. If you're a company and you make it onto this list, it is a huge badge of honor.
I mean, listen to this. It's been called the most coveted and exclusive list in the global financial world. And that's not an exaggeration. There are literally trillions of dollars invested based on what this index does. It's basically the most important guest list in all of finance.
And you can see why. Just those 500 companies, they represent something like 80% of the entire value of the US stock market. That's just staggering. When your company makes this list, you're not just a player anymore, you are a pillar of the American economy.
But, like any hot club, there's a velvet rope and a pretty strict doorman. In this case, it's the S&P Index Committee, and they don't just let anyone in. They have a really tough process to make sure only the right kind of companies get past the rope.
So what's the checklist? Well, for starters, you've got to be a U.S. company. You need a massive market cap. We're talking billions. Your stock has to trade a lot so it's liquid. And here's the kicker. You have to have been consistently profitable for at least a year. No flash in the pans allowed. Okay, quick sidebar on that term, market capitalization, or market cap. It's super simple, really. It's just the total value of all of a company's shares. You just multiply the number of shares out there by the current stock price. But, and this is a big but, the S&P Committee has its own special way of looking at a company's size.
See, they don't count all the shares. They completely ignore the shares held by insiders, by the founders, by governments, basically any shares that are locked up and not really available for you and me to trade. They only care about the shares that are actually floating around on the open market. That's called the free float.
And this number, the float-adjusted market cap, is the secret sauce. It is everything. It's what decides a company's true weight, its real influence in the index. So the bigger your float-adjusted value, the more you can make the S&P 500 wiggle every single day.
Right, so this VIP list isn't set in stone. The market's always churning, companies grow, some shrink. So the keepers of the list, that index committee, they have this whole system for keeping the list fresh and making sure it's still relevant.
And it happens like clockwork, 4 times a year, the third Friday of March, June, September, and December. That's when the index gets officially rebalanced. Now, they can jump in and make changes anytime if something huge happens, like a big merger or a company goes bust, but those 4 days are the main event.
The whole process is super methodical. They gather data, they set the criteria, they make selections. But for our story, the step that really matters is number 4, waiting. This is where they recalculate everyone's influence in the index. And that calculation is what forces all the trading to happen on rebalancing day.
But here's the twist. You'd think rebalancing is all about the big drama, right? A new company gets added, an old one gets the boot. But that's not it at all. The vast majority of what happens during rebalancing are these tiny little tweaks to the share counts of companies that are already in the club. And that is the key to solving our Tesla mystery.
Okay, let's bring it all back to that crazy last-second trade in Tesla. Because this is where the simple, elegant idea of tracking an index suddenly gets really complicated and, well, expensive. So, mystery solved.
What happened was this. On that exact Friday, the S&P committee made what's called a positive float adjustment for Tesla. In simple terms, they decided Tesla had more shares available for trading, so its official share count inside the index had to go up. And what does that mean? It means every single S&P 500 index fund on Earth had to buy more Tesla stock at that exact moment to keep tracking the index perfectly.
Think about it. On any normal day, the amount of trading at the close is pretty tame. But on rebalancing day, when every one of these giant funds has to execute the same trade at the same time, the volume just goes vertical. It's a stampede, a completely artificial rush for the door.
And this is the hidden cost. All of that demand hitting the market at once. It creates a tiny, temporary price spike. It pushes the stock price up for just a few seconds. The index funds have to no choice. They have to buy at that artificially high price. And then, poof, the buying pressure is gone and the price almost immediately drifts back down overnight.
Now you might be thinking, so what? It's just a fraction of a penny on one trade, but it happens over and over and over again, and it adds up. Over a 5-year period, just from these little share count changes, this effect has cost S&P 500 index funds an estimated $150 million. That's money that's just gone, left on the table because of how the system works. Okay, so what's the bottom line here? What does all this inside baseball mean for you, for your investments? Why should you even care about this weird market quirk?
Well, it matters because if you own an S&P 500 index fund, you are paying this price. It's not a fee that shows up on your statement, you'll never see it. It's more like a performance drag, a tiny, almost invisible anchor that is constantly and systematically pulling your returns just a little bit lower than they should be.
It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? The very thing that makes an index fund great, its rigid, rules-based approach to tracking the market, is also its greatest weakness. That absolute requirement to trade at a specific time, on a specific day, no matter what, that's what creates these implementation costs that slowly eat away at your returns. So what we all thought was this super simple, passive way to invest, well, it turns out there's a pretty complex and costly engine running under the hood. And it really makes you wonder, right? What other invisible forces, built right into the plumbing of the market, are quietly shaping the future of your investments?